30 years ago, a child vanished from a quiet suburban street. No leads, no evidence, nothing except a single crayon drawing of a man with no shadow. What if that figure isn't just a figment of a child's imagination? Tonight, we follow podcaster Cassie Monroe as she uncovers a decades-old mystery, a secret cult, and a predator that defies the light itself. Listen closely, because the shadowless man might be watching you too.
Welcome to Silent Scream. Tonight we're diving into a story that's equal parts mystery and terror. If you think you've seen it all, think again. Because some truths hide in plain sight, and some horrors have no reflection. In this episode, we follow Cassie Monroe, a true crime podcaster investigating a cold case where a child disappeared, leaving behind only a strange drawing. What begins as an ordinary investigation quickly spirals into something that defies explanation. Stick with us, keep your lights on, and listen carefully. Because in this story, shadows might not be what you think they are. The first thing you notice in the drawing is the absence. A stick figure man, crayon-streaked and wobbly, but with one impossible detail. He had no shadow. Cassie Monroe stared at it, her fingers frozen over the yellowed paper. The kind you'd find tucked in a forgotten drawer of an old suburban home. The podcaster in her, trained to chase facts, wanted to laugh it off. A child's imagination, a meaningless doodle. But something about the way the light fell on the page made her stomach tighten. A slow, creeping nausea she couldn't shake. The child who drew it vanished 30 years ago. No trace, no suspects. No evidence, except this drawing, the only surviving whisper of a life erased. As she leaned back, her recorder capturing every soft scrape of crayon lines in her mind, a cold draft slipped through the room. Though the windows were closed, a voice whispered in memory, "He doesn't belong to the light." Cassie swallowed hard. Somewhere deep in the quiet streets of this sleepy town, the man with no shadow was still waiting. And now, she feared he knew she was watching. Cassie Monroe parked her rental car on the cracked asphalt of Willow Lane, a suburban cul-de-sac that looked harmless enough under the late afternoon sun. Rows of identical brick houses sat silent, their lawns neatly trimmed, as though the town itself were holding its breath. She stepped out, gripping her microphone in one hand and a folder of old case files in the other. 30 years ago, a child named Tommy Graves had disappeared from this street. And despite the best efforts of local police, he had simply vanished. The only thing left behind had been a single crayon drawing of a man who seemed wrong. No shadow. Cassie had seen her fair share of strange evidence in her career as a true crime podcaster, but there was something about this case that gnawed at her rational mind. The town seemed too quiet, too pristine, the kind of quiet that hides something rotten. She walked up to the first house on the street, the one where Tommy had last been seen. Mrs. Harlan, now in her late 50s, opened the door with a hesitant smile. "You're the podcaster. I've been wondering when someone would come." Cassie's recorder clicked on. "Thank you for seeing me, Mrs. Harlan. I just have a few questions about Tommy, if you don't mind." Mrs. Harlan's eyes flicked past her into the street, then back. I don't know what good it'll do. Everyone has their memories, but they're not always accurate. Cassie leaned forward, sensing the hesitation. I just want the truth. Anything you remember, no matter how small. The woman swallowed, her hands trembling slightly. I remember the day he vanished. Tommy was drawing in the yard. I thought he was pretending, imagining monsters. But the drawing, it terrified me. There was this figure, a man, and no matter how the sun shone, he didn't have a shadow. I remember thinking I was seeing things. Cassie's pen paused over her notebook. No shadow? Mrs. Harlan nodded, staring down at the ground. It's impossible, but everyone who saw him that day, we all remember the same thing. A figure that didn't belong to the light. The words prickled at the back of Cassie's neck. She always prided herself on logic. This could not be real, could it? Her next stop was Mr. Jenkins, the mailman, who was a boyhood neighbor of Tommy. When Cassie showed him the old drawing, his hands shook. I saw him too, he whispered. That man. He was standing by the tree at the end of the cul-de-sac. No shadow. Didn't look right at all. Everyone thought we were exaggerating, but we weren't. The pattern was undeniable. Every witness, neighbors, friends, even a passing jogger remembered the same impossible figure. The more Cassie dug, the more she realized this wasn't just a missing child case. Something unnatural had left a void in the town, a hole in the very fabric of memory. By the time she returned to her motel room that night, the unease had settled in her bones. She reviewed the files, noting the similarities. Every child who had drawn or described the man with no shadow had disappeared. And the records hinted at an ancient local society, a cult that had existed quietly for decades. They called themselves the Umbre, practitioners of an arcane, horrific art, unmaking, erasing people completely, leaving no evidence, not even a shadow. Cassie sensed one the light. Her breath caught in her throat. She had gone so far down the rabbit hole. Now this thing was coming for her. The next day, she tried to trace the origins of the cult, finding hints of their existence stretching back over a century. Newspaper clippings spoke of unexplained vanishings, strange gatherings in abandoned warehouses, and folklore that the townspeople had suppressed. She realized the Umbre were not merely secret. They were patient. They waited decades for the right target, and now, after years of observation, Cassie had wandered into their attention. The more she researched, the more she saw patterns in her own life. Strangers watching from windows, shadows that didn't line, brief glimpses of a figure that vanished whenever she turned to face it. Sleep became impossible. Every knock, every creak in the motel hallway set her nerves aflame. Her investigation led her to the outskirts of town, to a decaying church hidden behind overgrown trees. The front doors hung ajar, blackened by age and neglect. Something compelled her forward, part fear, part morbid curiosity. Inside, the pews were covered in dust, but symbols etched into the floor caught her attention. Triangles, intersecting circles, strange runes she recognized from Tommy's babysitter's journal. A sudden sound made her whip around. The air shimmered like heat over asphalt, and then the figure appeared. A man, no shadow, eyes deep, impossible. He raised a hand as if to acknowledge her intrusion. Cassie stumbled back, tripping over the broken floorboards. The figure advanced without a sound,
gliding over the floor, swallowing the light. Cassie screamed, backing out of the church into the fading twilight. Her mind raced. Could she escape? Could she expose this cult to the world? Or was she already too late, already marked? Days passed in haze of paranoia. Every reflection, every street lamp, every shadowless corner became a trap. She reviewed her recordings obsessively, hoping for a clue, a mistake, something to explain the impossible. But the audio picked up only static and faint whispers, almost words but indecipherable. She felt watched, hunted. Then one night she received a package at her motel. Inside, a folded piece of yellowed paper. Her hands trembled when she unfolded it. Crayon vines formed a single figure, a man, and beneath him, in childish scrawl, the words, "You're next." Cassie knew in that moment that the Umbre's patience had ended. She couldn't run, couldn't hide. The man with no shadow had chosen her. And the town, quiet and unassuming, watched with empty streets as the predator drew closer.
Cassie drove aimlessly, the road dissolving beneath the headlights, the yellowed drawing pressed against her chest. Every turn seemed to circle back to the same streets, the same houses, the same shadows, or lack thereof. The recordings she had made offered no comfort, each playback twisted into unintelligible murmurs, as if the town itself were rewriting her memory. At a crossroads, she stopped, staring into the darkness. For a moment, she thought he saw him just beyond the tree line, motionless, shadowless, waiting. She blinked, and he was gone. Was it the wind, her imagination, or had he always been there, watching, patient? Cassie pressed the pedal and vanished into the night, the world around her seeming both real and unreal. Somewhere in the quiet town, a drawing waited, a whisper lingered, and the man with no shadow remained, unseen, untraceable.
Thanks for listening. But remember, some mysteries don't end when the story does. Shadows shift, memories fade, and the man with no shadow may still be out there. Did Cassie escape, or is she already marked? You decide. If you dare, subscribe and join us for the next chapter, where the line between reality and the unseen grows thinner, and every shadow might hide something waiting for you.